Hello and welcome to this Beyond Blue parenting webinar that's all about caring for our kids in a world that has felt pretty challenging lately. We think this is a really important conversation we need to be having now as parents, and we are absolutely thrilled and overwhelmed by how many parents and carers and other key adults in the lives of our kids have joined us today. My name is Luke Martin. I'm a clinical psychologist here at Beyond Blue. I'll be your host for today. I'm also a dad of 3 girls in primary school, so I'm in the thick of it too, and I'm living proof that when it comes to parenting, nobody has all the answers. Most days we are just doing the best that we can. There's a lot of cliches about parenting that you would have heard. You know, the days are long, but the years are short. It takes a village to raise a child. You know, you're only as happy as your saddest child. And in my experience, all of these cliches are entirely true. It is the toughest job, but the most important job that we're here talking about today. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we're all joining from today. For Beyond Blue, we acknowledge the land on which our head office is based has deep connections to peoples and cultures across the Eastern Kulin Nation. As such, we acknowledge the traditional owners of this area, the Wurundjeri peoples, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. As an organisation with national reach, we extend our respect to elders and First Nations people across Australia, and particularly where you're joining us from today. Beyond Blue also acknowledges those who are living with and managing mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression, their families, friends and supporters, and those affected by suicide. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it today. We really invite you to pop your questions in the Q&A box. They will go directly to our team. Your questions can't be seen by the rest of the audience, but I will take them on my side and we will ask our panel your questions as we go today. And I apologise in advance if we don't get to all of them. Just a reminder that the information we're sharing with you today is general in nature. If you have a personal inquiry, we really encourage you to seek health professional advice to get that really tailored advice to your situation. And because we're talking about mental health today, remember that the Beyond Blue support service is available on 1300 22 46 36 or online at beyondblue.org.au. We'll also send you, after the webinar, a whole list of parenting resources and supports that are available for you. Okay, let us meet our panel for today. First up, we have author and parenting educator, the Queen of Common Sense, the much loved Maggie Dent. Welcome, Maggie. So great to have you.
Hi, everyone.
I just want to do a very quick plug. Maggie, you have a new book coming out on the 1st of August called Help Me, Help My Teen, which is sure to be required bedtime reading for everybody. Thanks so much for coming, Maggie.
My pleasure.
Next up, we have the brilliant Professor Harriet Hiscock, who is a leading paediatrician and researcher at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. Harriet brings over 20 years experience as a paediatrician working with families and some really leading expertise around children's sleep and supporting families facing adversity. Harriet, great to have you here today.
Thanks, Luke.
And finally, we have Craig Killian, who is a proud dad to a son in grade 5 and a Beyond Blue lived experience speaker who will share with us today some of his experiences as a parent managing his own mental health. Thanks, Craig.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so to very briefly set the scene, it's fair to say that as parents, we're raising our kids in some pretty uncertain times. We have huge cost of living pressures, we have global conflict, climate change, the rise of technology, the news cycle, 24/7, pushing distressing events into our homes. There's a lot going on and that's made a lot of us feel a bit unsettled at the moment, and that includes our kids. So we recently did a community survey with 1,000 parents to find out what's going on for parents at the moment, what's on their minds. And we found that more than half of parents are concerned about their kids' mental health at the moment, and 1 in 3 are extremely concerned. Bullying and screen time are the top 2 concerns for parents at the moment when it comes to what's impacting their kids' mental health. And for themselves, cost of living pressures were by far the biggest stressor. It's really taking a toll at the moment. And we can see the pressure this is having on parents, with 1 in 3 reporting poor mental health. So they're identifying as either unsettled or struggling at the moment. So if these responses resonate with you personally, please know that you're not alone. There's a lot of parents in the community at the moment kind of feeling the pressure. I might open up the first conversation with Maggie. Maggie, obviously a lot going on for parents at the moment. We need your help. What are you hearing from parents? What's front of mind for parents in terms of what's challenging about raising kids in 2024?
Well, I think you've already shown it on that image you just put up about those figures. And I think there's, what we actually know is that to raise children to thrive, it hasn't really changed for a long, long time, the things they need. However, the world around them has changed. And so one of the key things that's contributing to what I would call less resilient kids, less capable kids, is a combination of, first, that we demonise play, and we stole a year of childhood, the age of 5, where children were meant to still be playing mainly, not sitting down doing formalised learning. And that's another year of development. We don't appreciate that play is actually how they build socially, emotionally, all sorts of skills that we then have to put programs into schools to try and build them later. So play has definitely disappeared. Secondly, we suddenly do something crazy out in the world, and we took all the risky play things away, which was the big long monkey bars, the metal slide, the wooden seesaws. And what happened, we put safe playgrounds in place. Like, the worst thing you could do was let your child be hurt. But we actually know that when children make poor choices on play equipment and things, they actually learn to make a better choice next time. And so once again, that was a really big problematic thing. And I'm loving the fact that Australia is putting all that stuff back in again. The third one is, I think, the issue that parents have become such more, like there's too much information for them. So they're drowning in too much information. And they also don't always know the developmental stages of childhood. I mean, they're meant to have meltdowns. They're meant to be a bit revolting as a toddler. They're meant to be quite argumentative and into power struggles as 4-year-olds. And then we've got, 14-year-old, 13-year-olds that are, now that's all developmentally quite healthy. It's not a sign that they're a lousy kid or that we're a lousy parent. And so kind of, when we get to understand that there's no perfect child out there, never has been, never will be, there's no perfect parent. And then we have the Insta world over the top, which has meant that a lot of people portray their best images, which makes the rest of us think, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong. So what I've found is, there's one more thing in that journey of play. I don't know who changed the rules for Pass the Parcel, but I'm going to say it's had a big influence on our kids learning how to fail and be disappointed. And thank goodness Joe Brum listened to me and put an episode of Bluey in. So what we've done is we've almost made it like good parents don't let their children feel emotionally uncomfortable. And therefore, that means I'm going to protect them like heck, which, remember, comes from love. We want to keep them safe from love. However, Grey's knees, falling out of trees, making mistakes and having to have somebody give you some discipline to teach you how to make a better one is exactly what they're meant to be doing. So then we move forward, and what I found is today, the judgment on parents. Oh my goodness, not just online, and no matter where it is, it's like you get judged so much more severely. So I'm just going to share what happened to me when I was raising my boys in Albany in Western Australia. I came from a farming background, so free and feral was pretty normal for me. But I know there were people doing Skippy on me. So Skippy is, the Dent boys are playing in the bush and it's dark. They've got no helmets on. Like, do you know what I mean? So what actual fact, where children are allowed to stretch and grow can be seen through the lens of the judgmental people as problematic. And so I think the challenge I'm seeing is parents are overwhelmed with too much information. They're striving desperately to do the best they can. And that I think, that means they're more stressed with all the things you're talking about. And we know that stressed parents are not a lot different to a stressed child. We flip our lid far more quickly and easily. And, that's why I'm so keen to be here so that we can actually validate. It's hard at the moment. However, there are some things we can do as parents, and I'm going to put your hand up and say, seriously, let go of the need to make beds in the morning if that gives you a couple more minutes to have fun with your kids. But lower the bar and focus on connection and fun. And we may move forward in a more healthy way rather than beat the heck up out of ourselves while we're not doing it perfect.
Amazing, Maggie. There's a lot in that idea of we need to kind of bring back a play-based childhood. We need, to create room for our kids to experience the wide range of emotions that come with growing up. That's really lovely, Maggie. If you were to boil it down to some of those really core needs that kids have when the world feels like it's spiraling out of control a little bit, obviously, play is a really core need of kids. Are there any other really core kind of foundations you would call out?
Oh, connection, number one. We actually need to know that the grown-ups in our lives, no matter what we get up to as toddlers or growing up or teenagers, that they still love me and they've got my back. So the connection things are sometimes, the more time we spend them is great, but if you've got both parents working, that's difficult. So one of my big things I push is the micro connections. Where are the little connections you do? Can you just stand beside your son or daughter as they eat their breakfast and do a few circles on their back or ruffle their hair? Do you wink at them? Do you smile at them? Is it endlessly giving them commands? Or every now and then, can I just turn into a dinosaur and lighten the whole house up? Or, if you've got boys, the power of a random fart. Anything to lighten everything up actually doesn't just lighten up your child's nervous system, it lightens up the parents' one. So anything you're doing about loving connection, and I love, bedtime rituals. I think they're really important things to do. And, not every night, because you don't do it when you're crabby and you go, of course, I love you to the moon and back. We've got to pick the moments that we've got the energy to be that beautiful, loving parent. And you don't have to be it 100% of the time. The research shows that loving connectedness around 30 to 40%. And our kids can still grow up to thrive. We don't have to be perfect. And if we do muck up, repair the rupture, right? Go, hang on a minute. That's not the parent I want to be. Those are the words that I'm going to go and take some deep breaths. I'm going to calm myself down and I'm going to come back in and I'm going to have another go at that. I think our kids need to see that how do we repair ruptures so they learn that sort of a strategy as well. That's just a couple. I could go on for 2 hours, but
I will come back to you for sure, Maggie. That rupture and repair cycle is the way that relationships get strong and deep is such a critical point. Thank you for sharing that. Harriet, I might bring you in now. I know there's obviously a lot of big issues going on, but we know that the basics can really make a difference as well. Things like getting a really, quality sleep for kids is really protective for their mental health. And often that's something that we have a bit more control over as a parent than these big issues going on in the world. What are you seeing as a paediatrician and in your research around, why sleep's so important? What are some of the issues that kids can have with it, and what we can do about it?
Yeah, so the good news is we can do a lot about it, Luke. And sleep is one of those pillars, like getting out and playing, as Maggie was talking about, exercise, eating reasonably well, but it becomes particularly challenging in the teenage years because the natural shift in your sleep circadian rhythm is to want to go to bed late and to get up late. And if you were a teenager living in Providence, Rhode Island in the US, you would start school at 10 a.m. because that's when you naturally want to wake up as a teenager and go to school and learn. But that's not going to happen, I don't think, in Australia or New Zealand anytime soon. So I think it's about supporting teens and preteens to realise that, as they know, if you get a good night's sleep, you feel better the next day. If you're angry about something, you can control that a bit better. You can turn up to school better able to learn. You might do better at your sports. So it's finding a motivator for your kid about something they care about that might make them want to have a good sleep routine. And I think, there's lots of stuff obviously about social media, but it's pretty clear you should get the media out of the bedroom at bedtime. And as parents, we have to model that as well. So you can't tell your teen to get your phone out of your room and have your phone next to your bed overnight. So we've got to really think about what we're modeling. And I think, Teenagers will want to go to bed later. That's normal. They have to get up and start school the next day. They might have a bit of a sleep in on the weekend. That's okay as well. And I really like what Maggie said. You don't have to have a perfectly clean bedroom. That's not the important thing. It's more about having a period of screen-free time before going to bed, maybe 30 minutes to 60 minutes off the screens, some sort of wind down activity, listening to music, having a bath, reading a book. Then you're going into bed and keeping those screens and the media out of the bedroom overnight, which is really challenging, I know, for many teenagers and parents.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a battle that we might touch on a little bit later in this chat as well. But that's some really great advice around getting on top of sleep. We know that sleep disturbances are common, but sometimes they can also be a bit of a flag that a kid's having a lot of worries, or they're kind of ruminating on stuff when they're trying to get to bed. If we shift focus now to kind of mental health concerns in kids, what are the signs that parents should look out for, and when does it cross that line when it's, a normal part of what we would expect versus something that's a little bit more concerning that we should do something about?
Yeah, that's a great question, Luke. And I think there's two key things that parents need to look out for. One is how long have things been going on for? So if you notice your kid is, flash or withdrawn or crying or not sleeping well, not exercising well, not eating well, and it's going on for 3 or more weeks, that's a bit of a red flag for us to say, okay, this is not just the normal ups and downs of childhood or teenage years. That's time to actually sit down, have a chat and try and find out where they're at, what's going on, and then think about getting professional help. The other sort of warning sign and red flag is when they're no longer enjoying the things they used to enjoy doing. So they no longer want to go to basketball. They no longer want to hang out with their mates on the weekend, and they used to always enjoy doing that. They don't want to go to drama practice anymore or music or whatever it might be. So it's a sort of combination of how long things have been going on for, and if you can see your kid withdrawing from the things that they used to really enjoy. And it does, it's quite hard for parents because particularly in teen years, it's normal to be grumpy. It's normal to be non-communicative and not say anything. And irritability is common in teenage years, but actually irritability is also a sign of depression. So I think parents can think, oh, my kid's just being a pain in the whatever. But actually underlying that, they've got a mental health issue emerging. So it's that sort of longevity of symptoms and the loss of enjoyment and withdrawal from things that they used to enjoy that really the key red flags.
Yeah, there's some really helpful rules of thumb there. Thanks, Harriet. Just one quick one before we move on to Craig. Our survey found that a lot of parents are really struggling with cost of living at the moment. They're really feeling the pinch. So parents themselves need a lot of support at the moment. Yep. For your advice for families that are finding it hard to make ends meet financially, what are some supports that might help them, or what are some things that can help to keep in mind as a parent in that situation?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is that what we know from the research is actually not monetary gifts that make a difference to the connection that what Maggie was talking about between parents and kids. It's actually that time you spend with them, and you don't have to spend money to do that. That can be going for a walk. That can be sitting down and watching a Netflix show together. It's spending time with your young person, teenager and kid. And sometimes they don't want that time to be in frank conversation, over the table. They don't want to sit there. Craig's laughing. They might want to go for a walk or be in the car chatting to you. So actually to build that connection doesn't take money. It just takes some of your time. But the reality is that for some families, they're actually struggling to put food on the table, and we can say, yes, make time, but they are really stressed out. And I do think it's connecting with financial counsellors, financial helplines, Centrelink, because some of the work we've been doing is actually showing that families are often unaware of the benefits they might be entitled to, and some funding and support can make a big difference to paying the rent and putting food on the table. So I think it's a combination of those things to think about. Yeah.
Thanks, Harriet. Yeah, it's great advice. And we'll flag these at the end of the webinar, but the National Debt Helpline is is staffed by financial counsellors. It's a great first step if you are struggling financially, if you're really struggling to meet your financial commitments. 1-800-007-007 is a great number to call as a starting point. Craig, I might bring you into the chat now. And we heard in our survey that 1 in 3 parents, are struggling with their mental health at the moment, which is something you yourself have experienced. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your story with the audience today?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, just really want to say thank you. This is amazing to be amongst this panel. Already some amazing tips so far. As for my story, so pretty much I suffer from anxiety and depression. I've had it probably for about, it's one of those odd things. The more you learn about it, the more you learn how longer you've had it for. But let's just say that the straw that broke the camel's back was about 8 years ago. Ironically, 11 years ago. So ironically, it was around the time where my wife told me that she was pregnant. And so these types of things trigger that. And it's going back to what Maggie said about, there's everywhere you look, there's the perfect parent. There's the perfect parent. There's a perfect parent, especially on social media, there's the perfect parent. And so at the time when my wife told me that she was pregnant, there's this, I call it the impossible man. There's this thing that triggered inside my head that I had to go out and suddenly become this provider, suddenly become this perfect parent. And these things led me to, I guess, a career path that wasn't suited for me. And ironically, led me further away from my family than it did actually bringing me closer as a parent and as a father. And it's one of those, things that I can trace all of those unrealistic standards that I put on myself back to when I was a young kid, to when I was a teenager, to when I was growing up in regional areas where a man should be like this, or not even just a man, an adult needs to be like this, and so on and so forth. And these things planted, I guess, the seeds and the roots that would later come up and basically cause this issue when I was early 30s, and obviously still there today. It's hard to pull those roots out because they've been there for about 25 years now, but pretty much you just don't have to water them as much as as you used to. But when it comes to bringing that back to parenting, I was just overthinking a lot when it came to parenting, and obviously my worst critic was always myself, and trying to be this perfect parent, and then thinking about it, and then being even harder on yourself when you failed as a parent. But it's not really failed as a parent, it's more just, being human. You know what I mean? There's no such thing as a perfect parent as there's no such thing as a perfect human. And so that's where it all triggered from, and some years of recovery, and to where I am now, which is
Amazing.
recovered.
Yeah.
Recovering. I'll still say recovering, but in a very, very good place.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Craig. And I think that idea of the perfect parent that we're all trying to live up to, when we make a mistake and fall short of that standard, we can be really hard on ourselves. I think a lot of parents in the audience would really resonate with that feeling. Can you share a few of the strategies or the practical things that you did as part of your recovery to get to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So it's one of those. So it's very much, once again, same with parenting, is I just tried to learn. I tried to study. I read things about things, I was telling Maggie earlier, I read books about from Maggie. I read books from Steve Biddulph, and I just tried to learn how to, I guess, get better at each little step that I needed, bringing it all back and just taking it step by step. In my recovery, one of the main things, so there was this beautiful quote by this psychologist named Brené Brown, who says, talk to yourself like you would someone you love and care for. And that was one of the key things for me, is literally I talk to myself like I would talk to my son. I know it sounds silly, but I'm always my worst critic. And now I'm more like, inside my head, don't worry, they never worked today. Maybe we can try again. How can we try again better this time? And that's how I speak to my son as well. Obviously not as calm as that. I have a boy and we're a very loud household, but it's always in a fun way. I'll probably have him hanging upside down by his legs. How can we do better next time? Only joking, obviously. Oh, well, he's at the wrestle age. So we get a lot of that wrestle age time into it. And so those are parts of my recovery. That obviously fitness, exercise, and just being mindful, taking those. We plan sometimes our diet more than we plan our self-care. And if you hold that in the same area, because obviously they're connected, I just plan my self-care, those things. And they can be something simple. They can, not big things. They have to, small things are always best, because let's be honest, in parenting world, the small things are what we can have time for. We don't have time for those big holidays. We don't have time for those big meditation getaways. Sometimes we have time for a McDonald's ice cream with a flake in it.
Those micro moments that Maggie spoke about are really realistic. Those little moments of connection, and that I really I like the way you speak about the relationship you have with your inner critic, where often it's in the car, that the journey that we're on, and we can't kick it out of the car, but we need to kind of keep it in the passenger seat or the back seat and not driving the car. Is probably a really realistic way to think about how we have this relationship with our critic. I think that's really profound, Craig. I might now, I know we've had a ton of questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to open it up to the panel. We're getting a lot of questions about screen time, which is not a surprise. I read a stat the other day that said by the time a child is 8, they've spent 1 year of their life on a screen. There are concerns that we're kind of shifting from this play-based childhood to a screen-based childhood. Maggie, I might throw to you on this one. How do we handle the battleground of screens? How do we get that balance right? Because they're not all good or all bad. It's really a balancing act we're trying to manage here. What's your best advice around screen time?
Okay, and please make sure, if this hasn't been you, don't go and beat yourself with a guilt stick, because we're only discovering this. It's the biggest social experiment we've been put under. And so the very first thing is that what is the displacement effect, especially in the first 5 years of life, is that our children are meant to be moving their bodies, using all of their senses to explore the world around them, hopefully with lots of language and connection with humans or other children or nature. So anything that displaces that, which is, of course, the iPad on their lap or the phone, in that first 5 years, can be problematic, because that's how they're supposed to learn. So the 4 things that are happening due to this is we've got children turning up as 5-year-olds with less oral vocab and language. We have them turning up with an inability to initiate and sustain play, which is huge in a school environment. The third one, an inability to self-regulate. So they're having even bigger meltdowns than what children would developmentally normally do. And the fourth one is no fine and gross motor skills. So they're not hanging out of trees, swinging on the bunkie bars. So what we've got to look at, some is not going to be as problematic. I'm just going to say that TV causes a lot less problems in the first 5 years than handheld devices. So just as long as your child can't work out the smart TV and goes over and watches some rubbish on YouTube, right? So basically, no child's going to be harmed by watching high quality children's programs, particularly things like Play School and Bluey. Let's be honest. As we go into the primary school years, the less that we have them on them, the better. Because again, it's still that, what are they doing in the real world that's building their capacities? And of course, some schools need to have these things now. So in a school environment, absolutely. What's your priority at home? If it's not the TV and you can't get them outside, how much time? But what are they able to access? We've had a 500% increase in inappropriate sexual play with children under 5 over the last 5 years. That is because the children that are coming with that knowledge have either had it done to them or have seen something. So that's why we have to make sure they can't see content that's inappropriate. And I'd love that all the way through. Then as they get older, I'm going to say really upfront that we now know there's some pretty good evidence to show the earlier that kids get a smartphone, particularly girls, the more chances they're going to struggle with their mental health from 18 to 24. We now know that there's more than a correlation now. There is a causation that the marinating of negative content in social media particularly is desperately impacting our girls. And so we need to look at how can we just make sure that they get it as late as possible. If you need to give them a phone, give them a dumb phone. They need to access their friends, maybe on mum's phone. They've got the Snapchat. They can stick connecting just because it's how they connect. So again, we've really got to have lots of conversation about how we can raise them to be safe digital citizens, because it's going to be around forever. And exactly, it's not all bad. Because our kids are being harmed. And then I don't need to mention too much about putting strong boundaries around your boys and their gaming, because sadly the gaming world is meeting all of their psychological needs, which we used to meet in a real world when they came home filthy after mountain bike riding and getting really dirty and falling out of with their friends. They're now doing online, and we have to put the boundaries in place. One of the biggest tips is that we have chores first, homework first, and then some playtime. However, the bedtime, thank you very much for that, Harriet, is not negotiable for any child or any adult in the house. And there's this beautiful device you can get that cuts them from any Wi-Fi in the home every night. Those habits can go all the way through, that can keep your kids a lot safer.
Fantastic, great advice, Maggie. Harriet, I'll give you a crack at this question as well, but I'll just a little reminder, please, any questions, any burning questions, please pop them in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can over the next half an hour. Harriet, any additional tips for managing screen time?
Yeah, just to add to what Maggie said, there's a couple of resources I find really useful. The Australian E-Safety Commission has fabulous online resources for children, teens and parents about navigating social media, sexual, sexting, etc., bullying, and that they've just got fabulous age-appropriate resources, basically, and tips for parents. Also, the American Academy of Paediatrics has a family media plan. So you can go to their website and type in the number of kids in your family, the age group they are, and it will come up with the guidelines of recommended screen time for different age groups, and then it will come up with tips of how to create a family media plan, because the whole family's in on this, not just your teenager. You're in on it, the younger kids are in on it, and it's got some really good practical guidelines to how to have this conversation as a family to set up those screen time use rules that Maggie was alluding to, because I see so many parents coming to me with their teenagers, boys in particular, who are gaming into 2, 3, 4 a.m, can't get them to go to school, really angry and throwing things around the house when the parents try to get them off gaming. And it's turned into this full-on war, because the gaming is very addictive and it fires dopamine in the brain. It's very, it's very clever. But if you can get in early and set up those rules as a family and agree upon them beforehand, that's going to make life a bit easier. And I think that American Academy of Paediatrics Family Media Plan's a useful tool for doing that.
Yeah, that's great. That's often a great conversation for a family to have together. How do we have a healthier relationship with our devices? I think it's a really great conversation. Harriet, I might just stick with you for the next one as well. We have a question about school refusal, which we know seems to be on the increase coming out of COVID. What are your reflections on what's going on with school refusal, and when a parent's really struggling every morning to get their kid out of the house, they're feeling quite distressed about attending school. What can help in that situation?
Yeah, so look, school refusal is a sort of symptom of what can be very many different issues underlying it. So the first step is to try and work out, why doesn't your kid want to go to school or can't go to school? And some of the simple things I do, particularly with younger children, is I draw a little visual line with a happy face up one end and a sad face down the other end. And I say, happy is 10 out of 10. School is so fantastic. You want to be there on Saturday and Sunday. 1 out of 10 is school is awful. You never want to go there. Put a mark on that line of where you feel about school at the moment. And then I give the kid 3 wishes. If you had 3 magic wishes to make school better, what would they be? And I start to hear things like, if so-and-so would stop calling me dumb and stupid, if I wasn't always failing in maths. Or so you start to get a story about, is this a learning issue? Is this bullying going on at school? And that can start to then help you think, well, what are the problems? And this is really common, particularly with children on the autism spectrum who can struggle sometimes socially at school, or with the sensory overload of noise and smells and other kids at school. once you've got a little bit of an idea of what's going on, then you need to go to the school. Your teachers, the wellbeing coordinators should be your allies and colleagues in this. And it's about going and raising your concerns and asking them and asking your child, what can we do? And sometimes it's trying to do a graded, attendance back at school. Okay, so maybe by midday you're just exhausted and you can't manage anymore. Let's just do half days. And you might need to do that for weeks to months, and then let's try and get you back. Let's, if it's academic issues, let's cut down your load. I see a lot of kids in year 11 who are just freaking out and have these expectations of doing so many subjects. And so some of my students now just do VC over 2 years, and they just spread that load, and that just takes the pressure off them. So I think, like, it's really about trying to delve down into what's the issue. And there's a smaller group of kids who actually stay home because they're worried about mum or dad. And they are worried that something really bad's going to happen to them. And that can be part and parcel of anxiety or depression as well. So obviously going to school and also seeking, mental health support for your child, certainly when you get to that point of school refusal. And sometimes that's through the help of the GP, referring on to a psychologist or a paediatrician as well can obviously be a good point of call.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that idea of almost like the behaviour is the tip of the iceberg, and we need to look under the surface to look at the emotions and other things that might be driving that behaviour is great advice. Craig, a lot of reflections and comments in the Q&A about, just how emotionally exhausting being a parent can be sometimes. A lot of parents obviously feeling overwhelmed and even struggling to hold it together a little bit at the moment. What advice would you give a parent who is in that position where they're kind of feeling overwhelmed? Maybe they're not being the parent they want to be each day at the moment because they are so exhausted. What's your advice on that one? And I'd love to hear from the whole panel on this one because it's such a big issue.
Yeah, so going back, it's going back to those standards again. To be bluntly honest with you, most of those times you'll never end up being the parent you want to be. That's just the truth of it. You have this magical idea of what this parent is because you watch movies, you watch TV shows or whatever they may be, and it's just not true. Like there's that fantastic saying is I was the perfect parent until I had children, and it's so true. It's so true. You know what I mean? You are so quick to judge and I'd never do that as a parent, but you just got to understand that you're human. And that you will make mistakes. Just don't be hard on yourself when you're making those mistakes. Make sure, but when you do make those mistakes, make sure you're able to admit to them. If you make it to your child, if it's aimed at your child, like I won't lie, there are times where I've raised my voice. And my son loves to remind me about it every time. I've raised my voice like loudly twice at him. Okay. And when I look back at them, they were all aimed at my fear. They were all out of my fear, then they were out here. One was he opened the car door as we were driving. I forgot to put the child lock on. My wife will kill me when she hears that story. But and I yelled, and he loves to remind, and I apologized to him, and for him to hear me apologize is a great thing for him as well. He understands that I have that emotion, it was out of place or it was unneeded, and that I was able to take responsibility for it. When it comes to feeling overwhelmed, you're always going to feel overwhelmed in certain situations because who knows? Because when you get good, like there's no being good at a certain parent. It's always constantly an evolving thing, especially with culture or even just physically. I was really good at babies, but then he became a toddler. And then I was good at a toddler, and then he became a boy. And now I'm learning this little tween boy who needs to comb his hair and put deodorant on. And I'm just like, and I'm relearning it all again. It's just constantly, just remember to keep rolling with it. And if push comes to shove, there are amazing resources out there, and there are medical professionals out there. Don't be afraid of using these people to support you, because if without them supporting you, you're not going to be able to support your family. You know what I mean? You won't be, if you want to be the best you can be for your family, you need to build on that with yourself, and medical professionals can help you with that.
Yeah, everyone needs a bit of extra support or a bit of extra help sometimes.
Exactly. Don't be scared of it. It's nothing to be scared of. It's not like they say in the movies, you won't be hypnotized, you won't be laying on a couch. Think of it like physio for the brain. They just teach you how to, rethink this way again and how to work with it.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Maggie, I know you'll have thoughts on really the self-care for parents. How do we go about it?
I just love that Craig's acknowledged that how difficult every stage of our children's development, right till they leave home, will have a gift and then a challenge. It's like you can't wait till they move and walk, and then you can't find them. You can't wait till they talk, and then you wish they'd shut up, and then you can't wait till they're independent, and you wish they weren't quite so independent. So welcome to that. I love that. And I as we go forward, I want to touch on one thing before I come back to what we talk about self-care. And that is that there is a significant difference in most mums around the mental load they carry, which is far bigger than it's ever been before. And if you haven't seen my reel where I made Kate Ritchie cry on radio, where I was explaining it to them, and she ended up crying, but because the two guys, the announcers, who are really good men, had no idea what I was talking about, why women lay awake for 2 or 3 hours going over every decision they made and how I could do it better tomorrow, and I wish I hadn't done that, and I wish I hadn't done that. How many kilojoules did I eat today, and how many steps did I do? And oh my God, why did I wear that at my wedding? And will they get into university? And oh my God, we've got 2 birthdays next weekend. How am I going to juggle that around? Oh, did I go and get, oh no, there's another washing load in there. So this whole thing keeps them awake, and it becomes like so big. And I don't think Insta's helped it. So just wanted to say that really, if you're co-parenting with anyone and you are a mum drowning in the mental load, sit down and go, what can I take off my to-do list and put on your to-do list so I don't have to worry about that? And it's been such an interesting space in that care. And then the second big tip I want to go as parents, I want whoever you're co-parenting with, and my heart goes out to all of you doing it by yourselves, but at least you're not arguing with another adult because you're right all the time, is what is the number one thing that brings the spark like firing through your body that you do as a growing up, whether it's riding in Lycra far too many kilometres to believe, like surfing, or you want to go to the yoga class and that can be the guy, whatever it is. Where are we prioritising at least twice a week that you do that before all the other stuff we have to figure out for the kids? Because what I know is that when that cup is full, we turn up better for a couple more days after that. And also we feel in our relationship that we're being supported in a way that really gets us. So sometimes, a bunch of flowers actually doesn't make us feel a lot better. But what it is, doesn't matter what it is, have that conversation, because that means I'm going to bring myself back into a state where I feel alive and I'm feeling good. That's what we need to model, I think, as grown-ups, and our kids are watching us as well. Make sure we check in. When are you going surfing? All of mine are surfers. When are you fitting a surf in? Because it's not always every day. And do I need to juggle something so you can go when the surf's good? Man, that's huge for mental health for our couples who are parenting, but also I think it shows our kids that we have to prioritise sometimes things that help us feel better, not just things that are supposed to make us smarter, like homework. I'm not real keen on homework.
Loving it, Maggie. Really, I'm taking a lot from that personally as well. That's great. Thank you so much. We might change pace a little bit here. And Harriet, we have a lot of questions about, ADHD and rising rates of diagnosis of ADHD, and some specific questions about the link between screen time and symptoms of ADHD and whether there's a causal link there or not. Anything that you're able to advise on that, what's kind of going on with attention at the moment for children?
Yeah. So look, I think it's a really good point. Is there more ADHD going on, or is there just better awareness and more people turning up and getting a diagnosis? And we don't have great data on youth mental health or teen mental health in Australia. We've only ever had 2 mental health surveys for children and teens, one in 2000 and one in 2015. So we don't have the good data, but certainly more people are aware of it. There's certainly a lot of teenagers coming to me saying, I think I've got ADHD, because they've been looking online and looking at social media, and they need a really careful evaluation. And there's ways of doing that paediatricians and child psychiatrists do to say, do you meet, criteria or not? We don't have any evidence to say that screen time causes ADHD. But we know kids with ADHD who have problems with focus and attention will often spend more time on screens because often what they're viewing is changing quickly. So the parents will often say to me, they can't focus and concentrate on X, but they're really good at gaming. That's because what's on their screen is changing all the time and capturing their attention in sort of these micro moments and focus. And so often we see kids with ADHD gravitate towards more screen time use, but it's not necessarily causal at all. But having said that, all the same rules that we sort of, approaches we were talking about before apply, trying to limit that screen time use, get your things done first, have your dinner first. Screen time might be a reward after having done your other jobs that you need to do around the house, and it shouldn't be displacing good sleep, good play, good exercise, good food.
Harriet, can I just jump in with that one? Because, when they come home from school, all of our kids are cooked. They're done, right? We've overloaded the curriculum. We've exhausted teachers, and they're less capable of being, kind humans in classrooms. So coming home, one of the key things I find, that increase in meltdowns in the car after school is not a sign they've had a lousy day. It's a sign there's nothing left. And that our job sometimes as a parent is to, how do I restore that, which can be different for girls and boys. I always say, be careful of the hangry boy getting into the car. Seriously, have some food straight into the mouth. But also that sometimes when they get home, our neurodivergent kiddies often can actually find they regulate better with some digital time on a screen rather than having some quiet time doing something that more neurotypical people do. So sometimes you have to have a little bit of an understanding that it can be a tool for regulation for some of them, particularly autistic kids or kids with autism, whichever way you like it described. And we have to factor in that in terms of how do I accommodate those stress levels for our neurodivergent kids. That isn't just as simple as, oh, I saw that this works. No, it might necessarily not, because every single child is completely unique and different. And that is the challenge, isn't it, of parenting, working out that worked for that one, how come it doesn't work for this one? And the last tip on that one is all of our children end up with a certain temperament that we can't always pick. And some of them just tend to land on the planet more dandelion and cope with everything, and our others who are more orchid-like, who struggle with everything. That is also nothing to do with you as a parent. They've turned up with that, and our challenge is to be as best informed as we can to meet their needs and accommodate them so that they can live in a world which has expectations which aren't always in alignment with being a little different.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. We have a number of questions about kids that are very quick to anger or very readily experience kind of big feelings that parents are really struggling to manage in the moment. Maggie, what's your best advice about how to get through those hot moments?
Oh, look, I had never seen a tantrum that lasted an hour and a half till I got granddaughters. So I'm going to say there is some definite gender differences, and what tends to happen with little boys is their physicality. They want to throw things, push things or whatever and run away, and our girls will often use their voice. So again, we've got to recognise, while it's developmentally incredibly normal, it triggers a lot of us as grown-ups, and it can be, what happened to us at the same age, where we sent to our room and given a smack and told stop to be. Our bottom line is it takes little ones a long time to be able to know that they can get really upset because we didn't give them the bicky before dinner. And it's okay for them to really protest and express it. That we don't have to shut it down or fix it or stop it, is that we just make sure they're not going to hurt themselves while they're discharging all that excess cortisol out of their brain and their body. And that really, if we can be the calm parent beside them, then they learn to get the calmness off us. So we talk about co-regulation. And it is frustrating, and it does take a while. And if you are the parent who gets triggered the most, hopefully you've got another parent who won't get triggered quite as much. But we know that it takes a lot of time for that. Now, explosive anger is another big part that I find boys will often go to explosive anger. And that one can be scary, but we also know that's a sign sometimes they're struggling with anxiety. So in other words, that it is also a male accepted emotion. And what I really want parents to know, I want you to be able to let your boys have these meltdown moments. I want you to let them know, I think you might be feeling sad, right? Because they're not good at the emotional kind of what is going on. Our girls can tell you, I'm not frustrated. They'll tell you exactly what they're feeling, and we have to do some emotional coaching with our little lads. Your tower fell over. Yeah, feels yuck, doesn't it? Like, let them sit with that so they know why their body is reacting like that. And then next time when it happens, we go, oh, no. And gradually they get better at disappointment and meltdowns. But remember that children don't deliberately throw tantrums. The tantrums throw our children, and they're not being bad or naughty. And if we can reframe that, I think we give a lot of parents a lot of a sense of, okay, this is not bad or naughty, which is what it was told to them in the previous generation, probably as they were parented, that it is a normal stage and it's frustrating, but they do tend to grow out of it, with lots of loving connection. And if you've got a co-parent, tag out if you can't handle it, because I've got it. You go. Yep. We're going to get through this.
Lovely. Craig, I have to ask you, because you mentioned previously you've only raised your voice with your kids twice, which is absolutely phenomenal. So what are you doing to calm yourself before you're handling tricky moments? What is some of your strategies?
Yeah, look, I'll be honest. I raise my voice. I only raise my voice in anger twice. I'm a loud person. So we're one of those households that you hear, that instead of walking over and talking to them, we yell out each other's names. But I guess it's understand because obviously we're more experienced with emotion as adults. Logically, we forget so much what it's like to be kids, to be that age, obviously, to understand that I may be struggling with my emotion now. Imagine someone who's new at this. And that's what I found a lot of them is like there's, and especially when it like Maggie said, when it comes to boys and stuff like that, there's in my generation, it was only happiness and anger. Anything in between that was considered like a leak in the boat. And so those are really the only things that you were actually ever taught how to handle. And they weren't even, especially anger was never ever taught how to handle well. When it comes to obviously handling your own emotion is really, sometimes it is stepping back and not taking it personally. We have this tendency to take it personally. And it goes back to that parenting thing where you go, oh, look, he's angry. And there's even that part of your brain that goes, I bet you got that from his mum. And it's not true. We're not engineers, we're shepherds. And I heard one amazing person say, you know what I mean? Like we all we can do is just guide them to the best places. And sometimes it's just their own personalities coming out and they just need to breathe and then learn how to deal with it. Like any type of exercise or anything like that, the more they do it, the better they are at actually handling that skill or understanding what that emotion is and where it's coming from. Oh, it's come because you're just, you're upset. Like I've talked about this before, is my son's big in sports. And so sports has this huge weight on it when it comes to comparison, because that's what competition is. And yeah, he drops and he feels bad and then he feels like he's failing. But it's a matter of just explaining it to him that, hey, look, some kids are bigger at growth and some kids are just going to be taller. Some kids are just gigantic. Just because you're not, it doesn't mean you're failing. Hey, let's think about, and I involve him, let's think about a way how we can work around it. A perfect example is basketball. My son's short for his age. And I just say to him, look, let's think about a way around it. And he thinks, and we talk, and we worked on running fast and power and stuff like that. But it's always taking that constructive way to dealing with his emotion and making it constructive. Making it something that he can deal with. And then when he finds it later, when he's by himself, without me, because that's most of life, he'll be able to actually have that process already in mind. Okay, so what did I used to do with that? Okay, we used to do this, this, and this.
Yeah. I just throw one thing in there, is that when our boys muck up, that's not the moment to have the teachable moment with them, because they're already flooded with big feelings. They're already big. They have no idea what the hell went down. No, they didn't mean to hurt their brother when they jumped off the top bunk. And so we've got to let them regroup, because we know it takes a while for them to be able to process what happened and then have the conversation. Might be in the bath later that night, might even be the next day. but there's that difference between genders, whereas, you know, most girls will know exactly what they did and why they did it and why you're wrong and I'm right. They'll just go straight there. So we really have to be mindful that boys' self-worth and a lot of men's is from their judgment of, did I do good? So when they fail and they muck up, we fire that sensitivity and then they shame themselves often. And that's why the other message is, please stop shaming your boy. Stop treating him as though he is tougher than a girl, and never use those words that, you know, once again, make him feel even less than he already is because he's already mucked up. That can really improve their ability not to be an angry adolescent boy or an angry man later.
Right. Harriet, we have about 1 minute left before I need to wrap up, very sadly, but we have had a lot of questions about bullying, and that was the #1 concern that parents had in our survey. If someone's child is being bullied, what are some key steps they can take?
Go to the school, talk to them about what's happening. They should have a school policy. If you're not getting joy from the certain level at the school, escalate it, go up. I have had that experience with one of my kids. They got bullied, and I say, this doesn't make it right, but the kids who are bullying you, they're not happy. If you're a happy child, you don't bully, as a sort of rough rule of thumb. So trying to explain to the kid the reason why they're picking on you might be because they're not happy as well. That's trying to create some empathy around it. But really, it's going to the school and escalating it and getting some action on that, and also some advice. Go to the Raising Children Network. There's some great resources around how to handle bullying and what your child can do to try and walk away, but it's got to be not just your kid, it's got to be the bully as well whose behaviour is addressed.
Fantastic. Thank you, Harriet. On that note, it is very sadly time for me to wrap up. I hope there's been a lot in this conversation. We've danced around a lot of different topics. There's been 100 ideas, and I hope there are some in there that you can take away and try in your week, and also really give yourself acknowledgement for lots of the things you're already doing well, because we can be our own harshest critics. So really take note of what you're doing well at the moment as well. I really want to say that if you are concerned about your child's mental health, there are supports that are out there. We've got a bunch of them on the slide. We will send you an email as well. But in particular, if you're worried that your child is thinking of harming themselves, or they're having thoughts of suicide, or they're very distressed, we really encourage you to call the Beyond Blue support service on 1300 22 46 36, or you can call Lifeline or Kids Helpline and really get some advice as a parent about how do I best handle this situation. It's a really, really strong encouragement from us. But there'll be a range of other resources that you'll receive in your email. You'll also receive a feedback survey, which will ask about how we did today, how we could do better, what you liked, and what we might talk about next time. Please take the time to complete that if you can. And finally, a huge thanks to our panel, Maggie Dent, Harriet Hiscock, Craig Killian. You have been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate your time today. And thank you for giving it so generously and sharing your wisdom. To everyone else, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.
Yay.